Welcome everyone to another session of TriTech University. My name is Bill Steppen, and today we're going to be taking a closer look at stations, what stations are, what they can be used for, how they function, how they're set up, and how you can report on them. As always, we'll just go through a quick walkthrough of what we're using today and how you can communicate with me. We're using GoToWebinar as always, and on your GoToWebinar toolbar, there's going to be a questions box. If at any point throughout today's webinar you have a question on the content, feel free to punch that into the question box and hit submit. I'll be periodically checking those off to the side here just to make sure that I can see those as they're coming in, and I'll do my best to answer those as I see them. We'll also have, I believe, plenty of time at the end for a full Q&A session. So if there's any questions at all, hopefully we'll get them answered here for you by the end of today's session. Now, that being said, if that GoToWebinar space is taking up too much screen on your screen, so you're having a hard time seeing what I'm presenting, there's going to be a little, I believe it's red now, red box with a little white arrow pointing on it to one side or the other. Go ahead and click on that, and that should shrink the toolbar off to one side or the other, which should let you maximize the amount of space that you're seeing for my presentation. So with that being said, stations. What exactly is a station? Why would you want to set up a station? So basically what a station is it's something that you can use to track customers that are using either pre-purchased or pay-as-you-go kind of, if you will, services. Now, depending on the industry that you're in, that service can vary. So we have the general term of stations that you could pretty much apply to however you want to use it. So for example, if you are a gun store, which I think most everyone who's attending here today is in the gun industry. I know we have a few music folks here as well, maybe some golf. But regardless of your industry, a station can be used to track customers that are specifically using that station. Now, as I mentioned in the gun industry, that station might be your firing range. So each individual lane would be a station, and whether or not you bill for the amount of time spent in that lane, or whether they're buying that in prepaid chunks of time, say half an hour or an hour or more, or if they're members and they kind of get access to that range as part and parcel to their membership, you'll track when they're using it using the station's function. Now, if you are a music store, let's say you have a recording studio and the amount of time spent in that recording studio coincides directly with how much you're going to charge them, this would be an excellent use for that as well. If you are a golf course, if you are a clubhouse and you have driving ranges, again, same idea there. If they pay for the amount of time spent hitting golf balls, or if they're just purchasing a bucket of balls that they can then go out and use, and then when they're done, they're done. If you are trying to think of any other examples, let's say you are a bike store and maybe you have a kind of pay-as-you-use repair shop. So you have all the tools, you have all the equipment, and maybe you quote-unquote rent out that space by the hour. So if a customer wants to bring their bike in and do the work themselves, but they don't have the space at home, they don't have access to the quality tools, maybe that's something that you offer. Maybe that's something you're planning on offering now that I've mentioned it. Either way, stations can be how you can keep track of who's used it at what point, for how long, and how much you're going to bill them. Now, the way that stations get set up, there's a couple of different factors we're going to take a look at. You'll notice that I'm hovering over this general maintenance area and stations. But before we even get to that, what you're going to want to make sure that you have, first and foremost, back in ledger maintenance, is a non-inventory category. Now, this non-inventory category is going to be used to track the revenue that you are earning for selling this service time, if you will. So if you've done a fresh install of version 12, you should already have this non-inventory category here for you. It's going to be called station rental. The ledger number that it affects is usually going to be a revenue ledger number. Whether or not it's taxable or any of those other functions, you can of course control up here in the checkboxes and so forth up to the top. Now, you don't necessarily need subcategories for the station rental, but if you did want to be able to, say, secure out membership access so that you're not just letting anyone make use of the quote unquote free membership time or maybe reduced rate membership time, in those instances, you may want to set up subcategories for that. And I believe I talked about memberships and how those work in the customer webinar that I did. If not, I've done so many of them, it's hard for me to remember exactly what I've all talked about. If not, definitely let me know if you want to get more in detail on how you can secure different things out with memberships, and we could certainly do a webinar on that at some point in the future. Either way, you want to make sure that you have a non-inventory category for this. If you are coming from version 11 or older, you may not have this non-inventory category by default, and you can simply set one up. It's not a whole lot of detail. You just want to make sure that you've got a specific non-inventory category that you can recognize for that end purpose. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be called station rental. If you want to have it be renamed to, let's say, range rental, or basically whatever you want to qualify that as. Let me see if I can get my keyboard to work here. There we go. Whatever you want it to be called, that's entirely up to you. Just know that as far as our menu structure is concerned, you're going to see that referred to in the menus as simply stations. You don't have to have it be called that at point of sale or anywhere else that's both employee and customer facing, but I just want you to be cognizant of that. So either way, we're going to leave it as station rental for the purposes of our webinar today. So once you've got your non-inventory category, the next thing that you're going to set up, back now to general maintenance, are your station rates. Now, the station rates is basically where you're going to go in and you're going to set up whatever rates you may collect or just how you're going to define basically the rate at which the customer is going to pay when they're on the station or on the lane or on the whatever it is. So you can see we've got some examples here. Now, as I mentioned, my example here is from the perspective of a gun store. Again, if you're not a gun store, just bear with the concept. You can basically imagine these as pretty much any kind of description you want. But just to kind of help us get started, we've got things like guest rates, public rates, member rates, and then we've also got half hour and hour prepaid. Now, some special settings that you'll notice here over when you're setting up these station rates. You're going to see that not only are we defining the description, whether or not there's a button caption, it's basically what the button's going to say, and then also we're defining the category that revenue is going to go to. And like I said, if you have subcategories set up, you'll define that as well. But specifically, what we have extra here are rates, minutes, grace period, and minimum time. So the concept behind this, let me actually switch to a different one here. So let's take a look at the guest rate, for example. The guest rate is basically what a guest would pay to access the station in this case. So we can see the rate here is $10. The minutes is set up as 15, the grace period is 1, and the minimum time is 15. So what do all these things mean? So the rate is how much the customer is going to be paying, and the minutes is basically what the rate qualifies for. So in other words, what we see here is you're paying 10 minutes or $10 for every 15 minutes on this station, and the minimum time here is 15. So in other words, even if they get done prior to the first 15-minute mark, assuming that we're talking about an ongoing counter here, which we are, they would pay at least $10 for accessing the station. Now the grace period is basically tacked on to that. So again, if we're talking about a gun store, maybe you give them a little bit of time so that they can get their eye and ear protection on, that they can get to their lane from the front counter, essentially. That's kind of the concept of that. It's basically something to make sure that they're not dawdling, or that they're not going to be billed for the amount of time that it normally takes to get from point A to point B and start actually using the station. So you can set up as many of these as you need. Now, whether or not you're going to actually have all of these available at every station, we're going to take a look at that next. But just to give some other examples here, we can see the public rate in this case is $25 for 15 minutes. So in other words, again, the rate as we have established here is basically every quarter hour. Now, the idea behind public rate and guest rate, again, maybe if you're a gun store and you have what's commonly known to as a second shooter fee, so you can have two people on the lane at one point. You would normally have a fee that goes along with that, but maybe it's less than just what the standard rate is. So that's kind of the idea there. Again, you can name these whatever you want them to be named. Now, the member rate here, as we can see, is basically free. In our test environment here that we have, or our example environment, basically the members have free access to the range as part of their membership fee. So we can see basically these are just straight zeros across the board. Now, if we're talking about prepaid time slots, we can see that we don't have a rate in here, we don't have minutes, we don't have a grace period. What we do have is a minimum time. So in our example of half-hour prepaid, we've got 30 minutes in there, and an hour prepaid, we've got 60 minutes in there. So again, the idea there is you might have a button that you've clicked on as a non-inventory sale for whatever it is that they're paying for that prepaid time. And then all we're really concerned about with when we're talking about the actual station itself is how long they've spent on there. And once that time has elapsed as kind of like a countdown timer now, we'll see that more specifically here in just a few moments. Basically, they should be getting off of the lane. They might have to come back. If they want to keep on using the lane, they'll have to pay another half hour or hour rate, or again, whatever they might want to do. Maybe they want to switch to an hourly rate at that point and just pay for the amount of time spent on the lane. So whatever your policies are, basically you can set them up however you want them to be worked. Now, when we're talking about value packs, you've got the two value pack category and subcategory options down here as well. So in other words, if a customer has purchased what is known as a value pack. A value pack is basically something where they pay a certain amount up front and maybe they get more than the intrinsic value of that purchase. If you ever go to your local car wash and they might say, buy a coupon book of car washes and get 12 car washes for the price of 10 or something like that. Basically, the value pack in this instance would be the redemption of that pack. So in other words, you might have, in addition to these rates here, you might have another entry here for value pack redemption. That would then point to the redeeming value pack category and subcategory. Again, if you want more specifics on that, just let me know. I think I might have done that as part of the customer module mechanics webinar, but if I didn't, again, we can certainly do a webinar that goes right along with that, much in the same way as kind of the membership concept. But that's basically the idea. You're setting up a master list of your available rates for your stations. Now, how do you make use of these rates? This is the same way in which you go in and actually set up your stations themselves. So back to maintenance, general, and let's take a look at stations now. So the stations themselves, you're going to set up here. Basically, you're going to give it a name. You're going to assign it to one of your store locations. If you have more than one, you're going to pick the location at which it is at. If not, then you just pick your store location, you know, the the only one that you've got at that point. You can then set a max number of users. So basically you could say, no more than X number of people can be signed onto that station at any point. And then for that particular lane description, you're just going to check mark which rates would be applicable for that rate. Now, in our example here of my system, I've got two decks, quote unquote decks. I've got an upper deck and a lower deck. You'll notice that if I take a look at lower deck 1, lower deck 2, lower deck 3, lower deck 4, these all mention that if we think back to when the rates themselves were set up, they're mentioning the pay-as-you-go rates. So the guest rate, the public rate, the member rate, which of course is free. If we take a look at the upper deck entries, you can see I've got these kind of the other half, so the members and down as opposed to the member rate and up. So the half-hour prepaid and the hour prepaid. You're going to see that on upper deck 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., etc. The number of stations that you have set up here coincides with how many lanes or stations you basically would have at any given point that you can put people onto. Now, if you need to have an overflow, in other words, if you want to have people kind of waiting in the wings to access a used station, you can also, as kind of alongside of that, you can set up what's called a station wait list. And basically the wait list itself is simply a name with how many people can be on the wait list at any given point. You can see I've got a very basic one here that can have up to 99 people waiting in line, so to speak, for a station. And the idea behind that is that it's kind of like a first come, first serve. You'll be able to see who's been waiting the longest by the fact that they'll be basically at the top of the list. And as people get added to it, they'll file in down one by one by one. If you've ever flown, it's very similar to kind of like a standby list when you're waiting at the gate. Shara asks, in version 12, you can have multiple individuals checked into a station. I'm on version 11. Yes, that is correct, Shara. You can have multiple people checked into a station on version 12. So excellent question. That is in fact the case, yes. So everything that I'm talking about here pretty much, of course, is applying to version 12. Version 11 did have stations, as Shara is pointing out, but yeah, not all of the functionality that we're seeing here existed on version 11. So I don't remember all of the particulars as far as like the changes from one to another, but if I can remember them as we go, I'll be sure to point them out. Shara is also asking, as far as the waiting list, can you set it to where members get priority on the list? That is an excellent question, Shara. I don't believe that is a function at this time, but we can certainly explore something like that. I would recommend giving a call to our technical support staff and just let them know that that's something that you might be interested in, and they can certainly submit a development case on your behalf to see if that would be something that we could implement for a future release. So thank you so much for the questions. And she said, goes on to say, yes, thank you. We do give our members priority. So yeah, very good. Let's go ahead and now take a look at actually how the stations themselves get set up for use at point of sale. We've pretty much done the framework at this point. We've set up the rates, we've set up the stations, and we've set up the wait list that is going to be available for alongside of that. Now, the way that stations work in version 12, and actually this is a change, Shara. Version 11, there was just kind of an automatically generated touchscreen as part of the touchscreen point of sale. In version 12, you're going to want to set up a specific point of sale menu for your stations, and we're going to take a look at that now. So off to maintenance, general, and point of sale menus. So here in the point of sale menus, I'm going to bring this up and over so that I can try and make it as neat and tidy as possible. So if anyone here has attended webinars in the past that I've done on version 12, especially the point of sale webinars, and you're hopefully familiar with this by now, where you can go in and edit and customize your point of sale menus. And what we're going to take a look at, I already have one kind of set up here. If you don't yet, you'll basically be able to set this up however you would like it to look. Now, Over on my menu here, my menu listing, I have a stations menu basically all ready to go. Now, the main buttons here are going to reference those stations that I set up earlier in maintenance, general, and stations. So if I right click on my first button here, I'm going to go to set or change function, and we can see that the button type here is station. And then the station option down here, let me just grab my highlighter in case you can't see my mouse. So the button type you want to make sure is station. When you select station, you would then be able to select which station from your station's setup this button is going to represent. So in other words, what lane this is going to represent, what driving range station, what recording studio, what service shop, as far as like those examples that I gave earlier. Then from there, if I go ahead, and let me get rid of those highlighting items there. So just again, so you can see what the difference is. So I switch this to skew, then I switch it to station, and then I'm having that be the lower deck. Then once you've got that in there, you can click that default button in the caption. It's going to pull in whatever you have for the station name. So we can see there, lower deck 1, and then it's automatically going to put in a time and followed by a tag. And the tag in this case is going to be station timer in those double brackets that we use for tags. If you're not familiar what a tag is, basically anything within these double brackets is going to get automatically replaced on screen with relevant information. So in this case, the station timer, when we check someone onto the lane, that bracketed information there, bracket, bracket, station underscore timer, end bracket, is going to be replaced with a count up timer of how long they've been in that station. If we take a look at upper deck 1, remember how I said lower deck 1 is using the rates that count up, and the upper decks are using the rates that count down. So let's take a look at that button function. We can see that this is again referencing station as the button type, and this is pointing to upper deck 1. But in comparison, or rather, I guess in contrast, this is now using what's called a station timer countdown. So this is basically how you can control which stations do what. So you want to make sure that you do have specifically buttons that count up as well as buttons that count down, depending on how you operate your stations. Now, how do you find out what tags are available? You can press F6 when you're in these caption boxes, and when you press F6, let me try that again, F6, there we go, didn't hit it hard enough. This will bring up basically a listing of all of the available tags. Now, they may not all be directly relevant at that point, but basically these would be for the different tags that you could pull in. So you can see how you've got tags for balances, point of sale dates, sold to, billed to information. When it comes to specifically the station tags, you can see there's the station timer as well as the station timer countdown. There's also the wait list option here, as well as the station customer and station customer X. So in other words, you can see the plain English description there of the time the current station has been active, counting down, the time the current station has been active, a listing of the people in the wait list, the list of the first customer in the station, if any, and then the name of the Xth customer station, if any, and then you basically replace the X with whatever number you want there. So you can see if we look at that particular tag itself, it's station underscore cust underscore X. And so if you want that to be the second person, it'd be station underscore cust underscore 2, 3 for the third, 4 for the fourth. You get the idea, hopefully. Now you can see that this wait list is already in action. If we take a look up here at the top, again, let me grab my little highlighter. This right here is effectively the station wait list. I'm going to take a look at that in just a moment, but you can see how it's basically already coded with that tag in there to kind of list out the wait list. So that's basically how that works. Let me go ahead and we'll just take a look at some of these other buttons. But that's basically what you want to make sure you have set up, is one button per lane, per station, per studio. Again, whatever you want to use as far as your nomenclature, doesn't really matter. They're stations as far as MSI is concerned. Just don't call it a comeback. Ha ha ha, but anyway, when it comes to the wait list now, if we right click and take a look at this button over here that I have set up, we can see that this is referencing specifically the button type of station waitlist. And then the caption here, we can see it says waitlist, and then it actually will display, without actively having to click on it, we can see who is all waiting on the wait list in order of basically who is on the longest down to who has just been most recently added. Now this will actually pull up when you click on that, and we'll see that in point of sale when we get to the actual demonstration of this. Basically, clicking on it is how you would put people onto the wait list. The other two buttons up here, the move station users and the clear station, let's just take a quick look at those buttons. You can see that these are technically what we call function keys. Function keys can manipulate different parts of point of sale, and in this case the function itself is move station users. So in other words, if we need to actually move someone from one station to another, rather than having to stop the timer and restart it someplace else, you can simply say move it. And better to do it that way than to stop and restart, because that could throw off the calculated rate at which they might be paying. So in other words, if they were on lane 1 for 14 minutes and then they move them over to lane 2 and they were only on there for X number of minutes, or let's give a better example. Maybe they were on lane 1 for 6 minutes and then they were on lane 2 for 6 minutes. Technically, they would have been below the threshold of our 15-minute minimum time. But if you were to cancel and then basically move them manually, they would have actually paid for 2 15-minute increments. So just something to bear in mind with that. The other button here, the clear station, basically says exactly what it means, that we're going to clear them out of that station, and that can be useful if someone got into a station, maybe it's not a prepaid one, but let's say that 2 minutes into using the station, an emergency came up and they had to leave. You're not going to bill them for the time. You can clear them out of that. So just something that you can have with that as well. And then we've already taken a look at that as far as the wait list itself. Shara asks, can you have someone in a station and also on a wait list? For instance, they go shoot on the main range while waiting for a private lane. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can, Shara. I haven't tested that specifically, but I don't think that would be a problem. I'm pretty sure that you can have a person on both the wait list and the station simultaneously. Yeah, I don't think that'd be a problem. Anyway, excellent. Thank you so much again for the question. I promise there are other folks here. They're just haven't had any questions yet so far. So anyway, but that's basically how you'd set that up. Now, the way that this works, and we're going to go to point of sale here now, is when you come to point of sale, and we'll go ahead and let's pull up our good old test user Mike Anderson here. Let's pull this down so that it's part of the main window here. Let's say we want to check someone into a station, and he's going to pay as he goes. So we're going to go to stations. We're going to go ahead and click on lower deck 1. We can see here it's basically showing the time as not happening. You know, nothing's going on there, and we don't have anyone checked in at this point. So when we click that button, we're going to see this station window pop up here, and we can then see that he's basically ready to go. There's no rate selected. If we wanted to add a second individual, Shara's saying she's not afraid to speak up when she asks questions. Excellent. I am very appreciative of that, Shara. You have no idea. But so we can see here, and this actually gets back to your earlier question saying, can you have multiple individuals checked in? For as many people as you want to have, basically you just add new users. So let's say we have Mike and a guest. Mike's going to pay the public rate, the guest is going to pay the guest rate. So we can go ahead and click the add new user button. We're going to click the select rate option, and we'll go ahead and select the public rate. So we'll pull that in. We can see it's now showing the public rate there in the button description. We're then going to do the same thing for the guest. We're going to select the guest rate. And then basically what we're going to do is we're going to start the timer. So we can either start them individually, but what I'm going to do is just come up here and we're going to say start timer for all. And we can see the timers are now going ahead. We're seeing the current total as far as what they would expect to pay when they come off of the lane as $25 and $10. And we're going to go ahead and click OK. And then basically we're going to see that that lane is now in use. There's 2 people on the lane, and basically it's just going to be in red there like that to denote that yes, that lane is active. At this point, we could basically go ahead and exit out of point of sale. And you'll notice if we go back into point of sale, regardless of who we pull up here, I'm not even going to select the customer. I'm just going to basically close that. If we go to the stations, that is basically still happening in the background. So no need to really worry about making sure that you appropriately save that or anything like that. If we go ahead and click on that, again, we can see basically who's in on there at any given point. And again, basically, that's just going to run ad infinitum until we ultimately stop the timers and then finalize and pay. And we'll see that in just a few moments. Now, you'll notice that there are tab buttons here on the station window itself. So basically the idea behind that, and again, I think pretty much everyone here is mostly in the firearms industry, but there's probably a few others I know that signed up at least. If they are going to be purchasing things along the way, so you know, you're spending some time on the range, you need to buy ammo, you need to buy targets, you need to buy these consumables that people are going to go through. So as part of this, we'll go ahead and let me actually do this. So I'm going to exit out. We're going to go back into as Mike Anderson. Not that it is super important here for that purpose, but let's say we're going to go ahead and bring in some ammo. I don't remember the SKU for my ammo, so I'm just going to pretend that RT14 is some ammo. So we've got that as part of the transaction. Now we're going to put that on his tab. So we're going to go to the stations, we're going to click on the lane that he's in, and we're going to click the tab button. And basically whatever we have rung up now has been added to the tab. So if we go back in now at any point, again, it doesn't have to be right away, but just basically any time down the road, when we go back to the station and we go to that lane that they're in, we can see what the tab is. If we need to add to that tab, we can click on it. Let's say they need another box of ammo, go ahead and scan it in, and then basically go back and click the tab button again, and that will have added to that tab. So once again, just keep on keeping on, and back to the stations, and we'll see that there's now a tab there of 7116. He really likes his ammo. So basically, that's kind of the idea there. So then let's say that they're now done having their fun, they've got their practice in, they're going to come off the lane and they're going to pay for their time. So we're going to go ahead and say stop timer for all. You'll notice when I stop the timer, there's these 2 boxes that show up for payer. So the idea here then is basically who is going to pay for whom. Are they going to pay themselves individually? And if so, we could say that the one Mike is going to just pay for himself, but maybe he's also going to pay for his buddy as well. So he's not going to be the payer, but he's going to pay for him. So basically we're going to go ahead and click that pay button. You'll see how it now comes up and says paying, and the color has changed from blue to green, indicating that yes, his balance is going to be brought into point of sale. If we undo that, we can see it now says pay $10, and basically whichever one is the payer. In the case of here, the guest who doesn't have an account, that would just go into your your cash sale, payment history. But in the case of someone who has an account, such as Mike does, all of this purchase history will be specifically in his purchase history. So let's go ahead and say he's paying for his buddy. So we're going to do that. I could also click there was a button here for, I believe, all of them, but I missed that. But basically, we're just going to go ahead and say finalize and pay at this point. So we'll go ahead and click that. You can see how it brings in both the tab and the two rates that they would be owing for the amount of time spent on that. At this point, we'll go ahead and tender. We'll just say it was paid in full for cash, and we'll finalize. They get their receipt. I'll print that up to the screen. Hopefully it won't give me too much grief. I'll be able to actually display it on screen. Of course, it's going to be big and goofy like that. So hopefully you can kind of see that. I know it's probably pretty small on the screen there, but basically you can see the line items there, hopefully, of what they just paid. So then if we then go back to point of sale, as you should expect, when we go ahead and take a look at the stations, that station has now basically reset and it's ready to go for the next person who wants to use that. Let's say that someone wants to check into a countdown timer. We'll do the same thing. We'll go to upper deck now this time. We're going to go ahead and keep on picking on Mike Anderson. We'll select the rate of a half-hour prepaid. Again, notice that there's no rate with that, just simply basically the time frame here. We'll select that and we'll start the timer, and we're going to go ahead and say okay. So now you can see how it's basically counting down from 30 minutes, and the concept here is that you would have then basically at somewhere else here, let's say in your sell other menu, or maybe you've got a button somewhere that you would have set up that actually is a half-hour prepaid rate. Let's just say it was 20 bucks there. Now you typically would have done this before they would have gone out onto the lane, but basically we would go ahead and tender that. However they're paying for it, again, I'll just say cash. And then when we finalize, it will have of course, the receipt for that. And then basically their timer will count down until the timer itself is done, and then that lane will basically clear itself out. Now, if at any point you need to see a snapshot of who is on the lanes, you don't necessarily have to be in point of sale. You can go to your modules and daily posting menu, and you will find a station usage option. And by clicking on that, that's basically bring up your station's menu, and you'll be able to then see basically just who is on what. So you can see it's basically a carbon copy of the menu that we just came from. So there's the timer going down, and whatever other functions you have set up for that, you'll basically be able to see all of that. So if you had actually the buttons a little bit bigger so that you could display the names of the customers that are on it, you'd be able to see that as well. So hopefully that all makes sense there. As far as the wait list, if we go ahead and go back into point of sale, let's pull up someone else. Let's say we got Mr. Pepperoni here who wants to go ahead and get on the list for Upper Deck 1. Maybe that's his favorite stall. So we go back to stations and we click on the wait list, and basically we're going to have him right up front and center here. So we're just going to basically say okay. And you can see that his name is now down over here into the wait list. And when it's time for him to go to a lane, we can basically click the move button. And then then you would be able to go ahead and basically select which station they're going to go into. Now, of course, lane 1 or Upper Deck 1 is still unavailable. So you'll notice it's not showing up here on this listing. Let's say, you know what, he's on a time frame, he just wants to get to Upper Deck 2. So we'll just go ahead and move him to Upper Deck 2. So we'll say select, and you'll see that he comes off of there. And now if we go take a look at Upper Deck 2, he's basically in there waiting, ready to go. So that's basically the idea there. Shara has a couple more questions here. First and foremost, she says, dude, we're going to have to upgrade. We're impressed. Second, she says, can you have the station screen up at the same time as a POS transaction? I know in V11 you can't. That's helpful to have up all the time for us. Honestly, I haven't tried that, but I don't think that would be a problem. So let's just, with point of sale up here, let's just bring that up. And then we'll just kind of have that over there off to the side. So let's just see what we've got going on here. So let's go ahead and check out lane 1. Or actually, let's go ahead and check in lane 2 or upper deck 2. So we'll go ahead and check them in. We'll select the rate. Let's say it's an hour prepaid, and we'll go ahead and start the timer on that. And then we'll say, okay. And then we'll check out lane 1 or upper deck 1. So we'll go ahead and stop the timer. And basically, of course, he doesn't have anything to pay because he's already kind of paid. But basically, yeah, I think actually, yeah, I don't think that'd be a problem there, Shara. You can kind of see how that's kind of updating itself off to the side there as we go. So if we go ahead and finalize, then yep, upper deck 1 is all checked out. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that you could basically just have that up as you go about your day using version 12. I don't think that would be a problem at all. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Another reason for you to maybe upgrade to version 12. So yeah, that's basically the gist behind stations. Now, again, as far as the reporting, there's a couple of reports that you're going to want to be aware of. There's basically 2 ways that you can think about how this gets reported on. There's the revenue that you collect from your station rental per se, and then there's who has been on what lane at one time or any given time. I know that in the firearms industry, it can be very helpful, and in some cases, I believe you actually have to be able to report on who was using your facility at any one time. So from that perspective, if we take a look at the reports, as far as your revenue is concerned, as you recall, near the beginning of today's seminar, we talked about how this is basically just reporting to a non-inventory category. So the way you see your revenue for that is you simply go to your sold inventory report and you would run your sold inventory by category, and in this case, the category is your non-inventory category for station rental. So basically, if we just go down and run the station rental, I'm not sure why I've got 2 of them there, but let's go ahead and select them both, and we'll just do today through today, and we'll run this report, print it up to the screen, and we should basically be seeing those 4 entries there for the 10, the 25, the $20 that we sold prepaid, as well as the $0 one that was also there for pepperoni. So or actually no, excuse me, that was the one that we checked him in and we didn't do the payment there. Now, as far as who was on lane at one point, there's another report that you'll want to be aware of. You're going to find that in your miscellaneous menu, and it's going to be simply called station time by customer. You can again run this for any date range you want, and you can either pick a specific station, or we'll just do like we have here. We'll leave it empty to signify we're going to run it for all. You can choose whether you want this in account number order or station order. And if you would like, you can specify a particular account. We'll just go ahead and run this, print this to the screen. Again, I apologize. This is probably going to be pretty small to see, but basically we can see the 3 entries there for Mike Anderson. And the reason pepperoni isn't showing up on that is because we didn't actually check them out of the station time. So it didn't basically finalize, if you will. But yeah, that's basically how you can then see who was on what lane at one point. So also for what it's worth, if I remember correctly, if we go straight to the customer's history, I believe there is a station history option in here as well. I thought I remembered it being there. maybe it was someplace else, but you would definitely be able to see their purchase history as far as their sold inventory. You'd be able to go in and see the station rental payments that they had purchased, if nothing else. So hopefully that's been helpful. That's basically the idea and functionality of stations. So hopefully this will be helpful for you, applicable to you. Maybe this is something that you don't currently offer, and maybe you're game planning this for future offers to your customers. If so, wonderful. We're always happy to see our customers tap into new revenue streams that maybe come from just the ability to easily do it in AMSI. As far as upcoming sessions, we don't have anything on the calendar as of yet for not this coming week, but the week after that. But I am still planning on doing my bi-weekly webinars every Tuesday and Thursday. So look for an announcement as far as the week of August 5th. It'll be specifically Tuesday, August 6th and Thursday, August 8th. Also, for those of you who have been keeping track of our Facebook activity, we are planning on doing a Facebook Live session this Thursday. So that's July, what is today? July 25th. We're going to be doing that, I believe, at 11:30 Central Time, and we're going to be taking a look at short-term rental groups and how those get set up and how they can be helpful for you if you have any kind of short-term rental activity that you'd like to track. So thanks so much for attending. Let's just check and see what other questions we have right now here. Raphael asks, is it possible to do that without prices? I'm not sure. I must have missed when that window came in. Oh, the reports. Actually, yeah, as you saw, even though we didn't have some purchases in there as far as like the prepaid and even technically we didn't cover into it, but basically the members, yeah, you can see all of their activity even without the prices in there, both in the sold inventory. So basically we sell a non-inventory category for $0, and then also the station usage report. So yeah, that's no problem at all there, Raphael. Let's just see if any other questions come in. All right. I'm not seeing any other questions coming in. It looks like some folks are kind of shuffling out. So maybe we'll go ahead and we will stop the webinar at this point. If you do have any other questions that you think of after the fact, feel free to shoot me an email. It's training@technologyforretailers.com, like it always has been. The 4 is a number 4. So yeah, I'd be happy to help out any way that I can. Look for an email in about an hour or so. That'll have both a link to this video as well as all of the other webinars that we've done on version 12. We've got a fairly big backlog of a library at this point. So if you haven't had a chance to check those out, definitely do so. You might find a few nuggets of wisdom in there that that could be helpful. Again, my name is Bill Steppen. Hope you're all going to have a great day, and we'll see you next time.